give everybody a chance to come in and sit down. And I want to welcome you. My name is Dan Dozier, and I'm facilitating a public hearing tonight. This is a hearing that is being taken to listen to public testimony regarding the issues connected with the cleanup of the Asarco site in El Paso. Okay, there are a few things I'd like to talk to you about in terms of how the meeting will work and answer any questions if any of you have any questions on process, on how the meeting goes. First, we will hear presentations from the U.S. Department of Justice, from the Environmental Protection Agency, and from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Each of those presentations has a PowerPoint presentation associated with it. The PowerPoints will be visible on the screens. You'll be able to follow them. After those presentations, Congressman Reyes will speak, and then Dave Edmondson from State Senator Shapley's office will speak. And after that, we will take public comments. Each comment I'd like to have limited to about 5 minutes. You'll come up to the podium at the front here. You'll be on the cameras will capture that, as well as the microphones and the court recorder. This meeting is being recorded, both audio-visual, and it's being a transcript is being taken. The transcript and the information will be then available to the government agencies to analyze and respond to questions or respond to the comments made at a later date. The agencies will take those written comments and respond, and those responses will be public. And you will have a chance, and TCEQ will talk about the public responses and where to find their responses on the internet. With that, and with I'd like to ask people a couple of things to help our stenographer. Number one, when you speak, introduce yourself, give your name, if there's any difficulty in spelling, please give us your name so that we clearly have it for the record. This is a record that will again be part of the court proceedings in the bankruptcy matter. Okay. Number two, I'll let you know if you're coming up on 5 minutes. I'll give you a little signal. If I'd like you to try to wrap it up within reasonable time, but I'm going to try to be pretty careful on the 5 minutes so that everybody who is signed up to speak has the opportunity. I want to make sure that everyone who wants to speak will have that opportunity, and during the meeting I'm going to find out how many people will have already signed up, so I have a good sense of how to conduct the meeting in terms of making sure that all of you who wish have that opportunity. Okay? And with that, I think I'm going to turn to the Justice Department presentation. Jeff Prieto and Kara, Murazak, pardon me, and I will mangle everybody's name here tonight. I'm dyslexic, and it shows most importantly or most obviously in names. But Jeff and Kara will make their presentation on behalf of the Justice Department.
The mouse?
The mouse. Where's the...
May I interrupt for a second? I need to make an announcement that we have interpreting services.
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the meeting. I'm Magdalena Giron, and I will be providing interpreting services. The devices are to my right, so feel free to come and get one. And if later on during the meeting somebody shows up and you notice that there's Spanish speakers only, please direct them to me, and I will also help them with that. Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a esta reunión. Soy Magdalena Girón y voy a estar proporcionando servicios de intérpretes. Aquí tengo los artefactos a mi derecha. Si notan que alguna persona durante la audiencia llega más tarde y se dan cuenta de que no hablan inglés, por favor déjenme saber, nomás mándenlos a que se dirijan a mí. Estoy sentada cerca del estenógrafa y con mucho gusto les puedo ayudar. Gracias.
Thank you. Okay, Jeff and Kara.
We're going to wait a moment until the slide presentation goes up, but again, my name is Jeff Prieto from the Department of Justice. I also have Kara Mrosek here from the Department of Justice as well, from Washington, D.C. I want to thank the City of El Paso for welcoming us. We are here tonight to hear the comments made by the citizenry. I also want to thank the City of El Paso for making these facilities available to us. We are going to start the presentation. Tonight, we're going to talk about the bankruptcy process. We're going to talk a little bit about the settlement history. Again, this is part of a much larger process that deals not only with the City of El Paso, but as we talk about sites throughout the country. EPA is here as well, Ms. Sykes, and we'll be talking about the history of other portions of the settlement in the City of El Paso, as well as standards. And then we have the folks from TCEQ to discuss the actual plan for the El Paso smelter. I also want to thank TCEQ for all of the work that they have done relative to helping put this together. And again, we thank you for coming out tonight. We are very interested in hearing what you have to say. Again, we will not be responding to specific comments due to the ongoing status of the litigation, as well as the fact that the public comments received again tonight will be transcribed and addressed as part of our response. So at that point, I'd like to turn it over to Kara to talk a little bit about the history of the site.
Hello, my name is Kara Morozic, and I'm here from the U.S. Department of Justice as well. As a little background, I'm going to explain Asarco's mining history. And Asarco has extensive mining history in the United States. Their mining and operational activities have spanned the last century or more, which has resulted in extensive liabilities at over 100 sites in 16 states. Asarco owns at least 26 contaminated properties, including the El Paso smelter. Asarco LLC is the debtor in this bankruptcy proceeding. Asarco filed its petition for relief on August 9th of 2005. In February and August of 2006, the United States filed claims asserting that Asarco was responsible for environmental liabilities for at least 38 sites. Now, 16 states, including Texas, have also filed claims against Asarco. Under bankruptcy law, Asarco is responsible to comply with applicable environmental law and clean up these properties. And next, I'll discuss this proposed settlement for the Asarco-owned properties. Asarco, the United States, and the states discussed the contaminated properties and reached settlements for Asarco to clean up the properties it owns, including the El Paso smelter. The El Paso smelter site is included as a custodial trust site, which I will explain a little in more detail later. And then the funding for the El Paso smelter site is $52 million.
Sorry about that. I'd like to just talk a little bit about the plan of reorganization and the disclosure statement. And this is the plan that Asarco has filed. In March of 2009, Asarco filed this proposed plan with the bankruptcy court. The plan incorporates 5 separate environmental settlements that propose to resolve federal and state environmental liabilities at more than 50 sites in 12 different states. And this is the entirety of what we're dealing with as part of this bankruptcy litigation. The plan includes remediation costs for the US IBWC site, which is included in one of the settlements, as well as the El Paso smelter site, which is included as part of the custodial trust settlement. I think what we'd like to point out as well is that, again, the scope of the bankruptcy proceedings is quite extensive, and not only is it extensive, different sites are treated differently as part of this particular settlement and as part of these particular proceedings. As part of these particular proceedings, a settlement was reached relative to the El Paso residential sites. Costs have come out to approximately $29 million, and I know that many folks in the audience are very familiar with the efforts there. From approximately 2001 to 2004, EPA was in charge of the cleanup, and they cleaned approximately 500 residential yards at the cost of a little over $17.7 million. Approximately 538 additional residential yards were cleaned from 2005 to the present at the cost of approximately $12 million. There is still a limited number of homes to be addressed. There is money that has been set aside to address those particular homes. But again, the cost related to the residential sites within the city of El Paso total $29 million. Part of the settlement is also, again, as we stated, the U.S. IBWC site dealing with soil and groundwater remediation as it relates to the relining of the American Dam. The estimated cost relative to the IBWC site is $19 million. And again, as we will discuss in more detail as part of our presentation, but also as part of the TCEQ presentation, the related costs as they relate to the El Paso smelter are $52 million. So the total amount that has been associated with the city of El Paso comes to approximately $100 million.
Now, El Paso smelter is included in a custodial trust. And what this means is that a custodial trustee will implement the cleanup, which will be approved by the state of Texas after consultation with U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Now, the custodial trustee has an interest in cleaning the site in accordance with applicable law. The state of Texas will be the lead agency in the cleanup efforts at the El Paso smelter, and the funding under this trust, again, will be $52 million. One other point I'd like to add is that the proceeds from any sale of this property would be available for required cleanup if the $52 million in funding is exhausted. Now, regarding language from the settlement that discusses the future use of the property, it states, "The trustee shall use ordinary and prudent judgment in considering a proposal to sell the real estate associated with the El Paso site and may consider criteria other than sales price." And if the settlement is not approved, the process for future disposition of the property in the bankruptcy case is unknown. Now, there have been some objections to the settlements, and the Asarco parent and the Asarco's creditors committee have filed objections to the environmental settlements, which includes the El Paso smelter site. Now, the general objection to the custodial sites is that the funding is too high. Now, this is important because there will also most likely be a competing plans to the debtors, Asarco LLC's plan for reorganization. The Asarco parent corporation can file a competing plan by May 15th. The Asarco parent, unfortunately, has not publicly released its plan yet. It is unclear how the parent's plan will address the cleanup at the El Paso smelter site, and the bankruptcy court will consider the different plans commencing on July 15th. And at this time, they will hear different arguments for each plan that's submitted, whether it be from the parent, creditor, and the debtor's plan, and then it will ultimately choose a plan to address all of the environmental liability settlements.
I want to end our presentation with just a couple of the next steps relative to this process. And this has been a very long process that is now reaching a new stage. That new stage being the actual hearings before the bankruptcy court to deal with first the individual sites. The hearing concerning the approval of the environmental settlements is scheduled for next week, May 18th, May 19th in Corpus Christi. At this time, there's no time certain, and I know there have been questions relative to when the various matters associated with El Paso will be discussed. Based on the way that the various settlements are set up, El Paso related settlements will be discussed throughout the two-day period, but there is no time certain relative to the specific settlements concerning El Paso at any particular time. The parties are looking to do that, but right now that has not been determined in terms of setting aside a specific time to discuss the El Paso-related settlements.
I'm going to get the PowerPoint control, so
Yep. And this is our last slide, so we're going to see the control. Public comments. Again, we thank all of you for coming out. As you probably are aware, we have received over 1,300 public comments relative to this particular site. We recognize the importance not only to this community, but the importance relative to resolving the environmental concerns that have arisen. We have opened up this particular public meeting. We'd like to thank the Congressman, State Senator, for requesting this particular meeting so that we could receive additional public comments that obviously will be transcribed so that we can address these. The United States then will respond to these particular comments, and we will provide the court with our response to such. It is important that you speak. It's important that we listen. And again, we thank you very much for the opportunity to travel to El Paso.
Okay, our next presentation will be from Terry Sykes from the U.S. EPA, and we're going to look for that slide. We'll wait for the slide to come up.
Oh, wrong one.
This is the text.
That would
Okay.
not be it.
This is the wrong one. Can you bring the EPA slide up? Slide number 2. There we go. Thank you. Okay, Terry.
So why is EPA involved in this bankruptcy? Because in 1999, we brought suit against Asarco and its subsidiary, Encycle Texas, and the state of Texas joined us in that lawsuit. Among other things, the lawsuit alleged violations at 3 facilities in Texas, including Encycle Texas in Corpus Christi, the Amarillo smelter, and the smelter here in El Paso. At the El Paso smelter, all the violations alleged were related to taking waste from Encycle Texas. We said, you failed to notify us of your hazardous waste management activity associated with the Encycle facility. You treated, stored, and disposed of hazardous waste without a permit. And you were in violation of certain land disposal restrictions when you placed that material on the ground. We determined that Encycle was actually engaged in sham recycling. They accepted metal-bearing hazardous waste from Asarco facilities and other facilities all over the country, and they mixed those materials together. For the most part, that's all they did, and they called it a metal concentrate product. We said, no, that is not a product, that is not recycling, and these materials should be managed as hazardous waste, and they should have been managed as hazardous waste at the El Paso facility. But I'll tell you what Encycle did not do. They did not accept dioxin waste, and they did not accept radioactive materials. And as further evidence of this, I would cite you to the GAO report, that's the Government Accountability Office report that they issued in November of 2007. Now, at the El Paso Asarco facility, Asarco agreed to take certain environmental actions, including auditing some of their operations at the facility. They agreed to comply with the TCEQ remediation order that had been issued in 1996, and they agreed to pave roads throughout El Paso in the amount of $1.85 million. However, because Asarco stopped operations here in El Paso, the environmental audits were never undertaken, and that left them with completing the remediation action and performing the road paving supplemental environmental projects. So EPA, through the Department of Justice, filed a proof of claim asking for the completion of the remediation activities, and the city of El Paso actually filed a claim for the remainder of the road paving activities. So what is EPA's role in the remediation at El Paso? TCEQ is the lead agency, and we have an oversight role. We agree with the decisions that TCEQ has made in this remediation, and we have signed the proposed bankruptcy settlement.
Okay, now TCEQ is going to speak, and speaking for TCEQ is Carlos Rubenstein and Brent Wade. And as soon as the PowerPoint comes up, you want the...
We'll take the control.
Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank the organizers of today's public hearing for inviting us. I want to thank the members of the audience for being here, and look forward to hearing your comments, your concerns regarding the plan. I was here in El Paso a little over a month ago to talk to some individuals about the topics that I'll be covering tonight. I did so at the request and invitation of Senator Shapley's office. appreciate that. Congressmen appreciate the ability to organize this meeting as well today, so we can disseminate some information as to exactly what we intend to do for $52 million, and hopefully address some questions and some concern that the public may have. With me here today is Brent Wade. Brent is the Division Director for our Division of Remediation. He is the one, and his division is the one that has put together the plan and will oversee its implementation. In the audience as well with us today is Lorenda Gardner, sitting right over there. Lorenda is the Regional Director for our El Paso office here as well. I would invite you today and going forward to avail yourselves of making contact with these individuals so that we can answer additional questions or concerns you might have. Okay, there we go. Okay. The site itself, and what is it that we're looking at doing with $52 million? You see I-10, you're familiar with the site. You're familiar with the location of the facility as it exists today, this area here. This area is what is east of I-10, and there's also activity that is encompassed to be conducted there. So everything you see shaded in red here, 422 acres, is contemplated under the settlement agreement. All of it will go and become the property or transfer title to the trustee under the settlement. It may not show very well, but if you see there's a yellow demarcation line in this map that also shows you the boundaries of the properties that would be included. And within that, those boundaries, you see that the present land use for the site is commercial industrial, and that plays a very integral part in the discussions that we're going to have going forward. Again, here's I-10. This actually is east of I-10. There's some activity that will be undertaken here. The site itself, where the smelting took place, is the area that you see here. Again, everything in yellow that you see in this map outlined is what would go to the trustee, for which we would be undertaking remedial activities. Because the present land use is commercial industrial, we're obligated under Texas law to undertake the remediation to that standard. In other words, to be able to address the risks that are there, and also to allow for future use of the property for their commercial or industrial standards. And again, that's based on Texas Administrative Code Chapter 350. What's at the site? The elements that are of concern, or the chemicals of concern as we reference them in our rules at the Asarco site, include arsenic, cadmium, chromium, copper, iron, lead, selenium, and zinc. The most prevalent chemicals of concern are arsenic, lead, and cadmium. Some of the questions that we've received is what is exactly what you're going to be doing for $52 million at the site, and the best way to demark that activity is we are to undertake remediation activities at the site. Remediation is the act of eliminating or reducing the concentration of chemicals of concern in environmental media. You do that by removal of the chemicals themselves, removal of the impacted media, or by implementing institutional controls to be able to separate the risk associated with the impacts that are on the land, and making sure that they don't migrate in the environment and they no longer pose a threat to human health in the environment. That is what remediation at the site will establish. It is not restoration. Restoration would be returning an area to an unimpaired condition. In other words, what is it that it looked like before the site was ever used for its present uses? How is it that we arrived at $52 million, and what is it that we're going to undertake? The site obviously will no longer operate as a smelter. The permits have been voided. They've all been rendered vacated by the commission. So it follows that since the structures will not be utilized for smelting operation, the most prudent thing to do is to demolish them so they don't pose a risk because of deterioration in the future, as well as the fact that we also have concerns about some of the structures in as much as we would have the land itself. That, we believe, is going to entail an expenditure of $8.9 million. We believe that activity would be on the near term, be able to accomplish that relatively quickly after funding is provided. Also near term would be almost $10 million spent on paving the site. I talked earlier about institutional controls, asphalt paving as a cap. and I'll get into more detail in some of the maps that I'll show you, is one of those institutional controls. There are some material that remains on site that is extremely fine that we want to manage differently. That would call for a repository cell to be constructed on site to manage those wastes. I'll cover that with you as well. In the construction of a fence to protect the institutional controls that we put in place. The expenditure is close to $6 million, $5.9 million. The biggest expenditure of the site is in the groundwater remediation. What we intend to do here is implement the utilization of 80 monitoring wells on the site. There will be both for monitoring activities as well as for capture of groundwater, drawing it down and allowing us to be able to control the migration of groundwater and also to be able to treat it. It is a long-term process, and again, it's reflected as a costly endeavor as well, almost at $22 million. There's post-closure care that is associated with the site. That would carry us 50 years into the future, $3.3 million. And then the $2.2 million that is associated with the management of the site itself, $52 million total. Okay. What you see here again is the site that is west of I-10, where the activities for the smelter took place. You see the present location of 3 depository or repository cells that have already been constructed. You note that on the upper left-hand corner, there's 20,000 cubic yards of additional material that we want to remove from its present location and manage them in a way as the other materials have been in the first 3 cells. There's additional actions that we'll take in cell number 3, and I'll go into detail. For your information, you see the sampling results of the highest levels that we found in the additional materials of concern, Category 1 materials that could impact human health and the environment. And these were, again, collected 5 feet below ground surface. We got returns of 7,100 parts per million for arsenic, 14,000 parts per million for cadmium, and 54,000 parts per million for lead. What you don't see reflected in the map is where cell number 4 would be constructed, and I'll explain the reason for that. You notice in this map the location of cell number 3. Okay. I'll wait for the chime to end here. Apologize for that.
Not even right.
Okay. Here is a current view of cell number 3. There's excess material that's been placed there. I want to point out, you see the trench where we would monitor the cell. You see the lined area. This part right here, the excess material will also be removed along with the 20,000 cubic yards of material that I highlighted in the previous map. All of it would be deposited in cell number 4. That's to be constructed utilizing the $52 million. The cell number 4 will be constructed in a similar fashion as to what the previous 3 cells were. It's going to be able to manage an additional 303,000 cubic yards of material, some of them from cell number 3, as I explained earlier, and some from the minus 50 fine soil and impacted media that we also need to remove and manage accordingly. There is an additional engineering study that is needed to determine the proper location. There's also offers an opportunity as to what the future use of the property would be. If we have a better idea based on comments from the community and those that are interested in the future use of the property as to what would go there, that could assist us in the proper and the most advantageous place to construct cell number 4. I may have gone too far. Here we go. There's additional material, Category 2 material, that is of concern to us as well. This material has the ability to impact groundwater. It could leach metals of concern and continue to impact groundwater. What you see reflected in the map that's before you is 22 acres of area that's already been remediated and it's already been capped. That is the area that is in black. The blue areas are an additional 16 acres that we would also cap utilizing the $52 million that's available to us. We have excess funds to cap additional portions of the property. Those will be reflected in the map that you'll see shortly. So relative to surface activities at the site, you see a summary of what will take place. The circled areas are areas of the structures that would be demolished. Recall the almost $9 million that would go towards that activity. The areas that are shaded in yellow are potential areas where additional institutional controls, the cap, the pavement, would also take place. What you don't, again, see in the map is the location of cell number 4. As I mentioned earlier, that would be driven by additional environmental studies, engineering studies, and again, better understanding of the potential future uses of the property could weigh heavily as to where that cell number 4 would go. Let's get into groundwater impacts now. What you see outlined in red is the boundary of the groundwater impacts that are associated with the site. The principal chemical of concern associated with the impacts is arsenic. What you see reflected in the table up here are the national drinking water standards. Those are standards that apply to every state in the country. That is our target. When we restore this groundwater lens, that is the target that we're shooting for. Those are the standards that we need to comply with. This will be a difficult process. You see here the sampling point represented in this west area of the property itself, close to Paisano. You see that the level of arsenic there in groundwater is 62.5 parts per million. Compare that level to the national standard of 0.01. And that gives you a degree of magnitude of what we're going to be dealing with relative to groundwater. And again, I want to stress, the goal and the target for groundwater remediation is national drinking water standards. So how is it that we're going to manage the groundwater remediation itself? We're going to establish a network of 80 extraction wells that will contain the groundwater plume. When you're able to extract groundwater, you create a cone of depression. And so you stop the normal migration of groundwater through the subsurface. You draw it towards those recovery wells. And so the 80 wells themselves will all complement each other. At the same time, you see down here in this area a 3,000-foot slurry wall that's to be constructed. That is a highly it's not fully impermeable, but it's highly impermeable area that we would construct. The natural flow of groundwater is towards the Rio Grande, and so what we want to do is with a combination of both the 80 extraction wells and the implementation of the slurry wall is be able to draw the contaminants to the extraction wells, be able to pump the groundwater out, treat it, and at the same time stop the migration of the groundwater that is already impacted towards the Rio Grande. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this is the most costly aspect of what we intend to do at the site. What about the property itself? It's already been covered in earlier presentations. The custodial trustee will be required to have approval of both TCEQ and DOJ before any sale, lease, or disposition of the property takes place. As we remediate the property, there's going to be aspects of it that could be leased or sold. But before those take place, those would require both the approval of my agency, the TCEQ, as well as the Department of Justice. It is important to highlight that any proceeds from the lease or the sale of the property under the settlement agreement first and foremost go to augmenting the funds that are available to undertake the remedial activities on the site. That is an important aspect that we wanted to make sure was protected, to make sure that we're able to carry out all of the activities that are there. The custodial trustee, Asarco will be the one that will be appointing the trustee, but they don't get to choose who the trustee is. The trustee is only chosen by the TCEQ and the Department of Justice. Actually, DOJ and TCEQ has already begun that process. Again, I want to stress that it'll be the Department of Justice and the TCEQ who pick who the trustee will be. Later in the presentation, you'll see a web address. We invite you, if you haven't visited the website, to go there because information on our selection process to the trustee is there. I believe right now we've extended the initial screening process to the 21st of May. So that's ongoing right now. We want to be in a position that when we get the funding for the $52 million, that we're able to implement the remedy as quickly as possible. Obviously, we will charge the trustee for implementing and overseeing the remediation of the site and to manage all of the trust funds that are granted towards the remediation. Lastly, again, I want to invite you, and we are going to, when we get through with all the presentations and the comments, I know that Dave Edmondson will also have a PowerPoint presentation to present. When we get through and as we are accepting comments from the public, we're going to try to put the slide back up so you see the web address that is listed there. This is something that we created. It's on our website at the CCQ. It gets updated frequently. And one of the things that we've also established is that if you go to the site and you click on the icon that's here, you will receive an email notifying you each and every time that an update is made to the web page itself. And this will allow you to keep up with the site activities, where we are with trustee selection, information about the bankruptcy case. All of it is in this website. And again, documents as far as the expert reports that are being utilized, spreadsheets that outline how we got to $52 million and the activities that we'll undertake. Everything that we've covered in this PowerPoint, all of them are available to you at this website. And again, it's something that we are going to be updating frequently. And again, I would invite you to avail yourself of this opportunity. But if you do visit, don't forget to sign up for the email updates. Those have been very, very helpful. That, I believe, concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Congressman Reeds, if you would like to come up, you can either come from up here or at the podium, whichever you're more comfortable with. And I want to thank you for coming. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Dozier, and thank you for facilitating this meeting, and welcome to all of you. Carlos, it's good to see you again, and I'm sure we're going to be speaking with you in the near future as well as into the future, because we do have a lot of concerns about what's happening at this site, and we're also going to depend on the Department of Justice for your assistance. This is, for us, a critically important issue. Not just for El Paso, but for southern New Mexico and for our neighbors in Mexico as well. As a representative in Congress for the 16th District of Texas, I want to tell you that I take issue with aspects of the proposed agreement. Understanding that the funding amount of $52 million was stipulated in the agreement for the remediation of Asarco and the smelter site is only part of an overall global agreement which includes other sites as well. It will undoubtedly, in my opinion, fall well short of the actual resources that will become necessary to appropriately address severe contamination levels at this site. It is likely that 4 to 5 times that amount will ultimately be necessary, but we simply don't know at this point. Given the cost associated with the cleanup of other Asarco sites around the nation, the underfunded settlement figure will only place a significant burden on our community in the years to come and on future generations of El Paso. It appears that the figure for the El Paso site was derived more as a result of a simple division of limited resources, and thereby ignoring the fact that the smelter operation is unique in its location, which is directly within an urban community. Additionally, remediation under the proposed settlement targets a limited portion of the polluted complex, ignoring the contiguous areas that clearly contain significant contamination, possibly rendering the overall site as undevelopable and a concern for utilizing it in the future, and also concerns impacting the environmental and economic well-being of our city. Many of my constituents have shared with me their grave concern, and some of them will share their concerns with you as well here tonight, that this smelter site will end up as the equivalent of an abandoned industrial site, and the settlement as proposed provides no assurances that this will not happen. And we saw in the slides where it's strategically located right off of I-10, overlooking Mexico on the one hand and abutting the University of Texas at El Paso on the other end. According to, I'm also, let me just make one more point. I'm also concerned that the limited funding level will dictate how vigorous the effort will be to protect our groundwater. And Carlos, you went into that extensively, but in our experience, we simply don't know the kinds of challenges that you're going to run up against in this area because of almost 100 years of contamination. According to TCEQ, there is a contaminated groundwater plume containing both diesel from leaking petroleum storage tanks and metals from the smelter. The TCEQ also indicates that this groundwater plume is migrating westward towards the Rio Grande, which is what you showed in the slide. The limited groundwater provisions as outlined in the remediation plan may be wholly insufficient to prevent the further migration of heavy metals into the river, and in my opinion, should be reevaluated and should be strengthened. The settlement also fails to address the issue of Asarco's illegal disposal of hazardous waste from the Department of Defense Rocky Mountain Arsenal. The Government Accountability Office, which ran the investigation at my request of Asarco's storage and unpermitted burning of the waste from the arsenal, revealed that Asarco skirted the permit process for disposition of toxic waste, which would have required that the public be notified of what materials and what byproducts were being released into our air. At a minimum, the settlement agreement should have required Asarco to provide EPA, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and the City of El Paso with detailed information regarding their handling of DOD waste so that the remediation plan can be adjusted accordingly. And I am mindful that in your presentation from the Department of Justice, you assured us that of the types of waste that you say Asarco did not handle here. But I will tell you also that there are a number of people that live in this area that are very suspicious because of the way that this whole issue was handled. And not addressing it in the settlement only raises those suspicions. Just telling you the way I hear it here in the community. So finally, it is important to mention the impact that the site has had on the health and well-being of our Asarco workers as well. I realize that this settlement is singularly focused on the future of the smelter site itself, but I think the two are inextricably connected. I request this evening that the Department of Justice, to whatever extent possible, and in conjunction with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration and the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, that you pursue an appropriate legal course of action to assist workers with health problems related to the exposure at this site. And I will be following up with you on this. I realize that it was difficult to craft this agreement because of the number of polluted sites and the limited resources that were available through the constraints of the bankruptcy itself. However, I believe strongly that the issues that we have outlined here tonight, and that will be outlined here tonight by individuals that are going to be speaking after me, need to be addressed appropriately before the settlement is finalized. Only then can El Pasoans have some assurances that the site will not pose a risk to their health and well-being today and for future El Pasoans and future generations. So thank you, and I wish you well and hope you have a productive evening. I know that there are many people here that will express their concerns just as I have. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Congressman. We appreciate it, and we are going to make a point that everybody here who wants to speak has an opportunity, so thank you very much.
Thank you, and of course, I am available for whatever follow-up we need to do. Thank you all very much.
Okay, our next speaker is Dave Edmondson on behalf of Senator Elliott Shapley. Dave has a PowerPoint here, and so here we go. It's up. And thank you, Dave.
First of all, thank you. My name is David Edmondson. I'm General Counsel for State Senator Elliott Shapley. The senator does wish he could be here, but as we all know, they're in the last 3 weeks of the legislative session, and as such, his schedule is slightly ridiculous. So I'm here on his behalf. in the interest of time and the fact that there have been a number of presentations prior to me, I'm going to do my best not to duplicate what's already been discussed, and instead just focus on what the senator's main two concerns are. And it's first, he believes that the $52 million proposed settlement and the cleanup associated with that figure falls far short of a true cleanup. And secondly, the plan does not include all of Asarco's property. In the slide, you'll see what we all know, and the overview that Carlos actually gave previously, so I won't duplicate that. But the concern that we have with the $52 million figure and the plan that, while not necessarily prescriptive in terms of what the trustee must do, but certainly gives an idea of what could be done with any resulting bankruptcy funds, is that we have concerns that we're going to end up with what is in effect a 100-acre parking lot there sitting in between Paisano, the railroad tracks, and I-10, in that in terms of ground level, the most comprehensive remediation that's actually being conducted is a scrape and cap job, in that we're putting asphalt and paving the majority of the site. And as a result, we're leaving for the community of El Paso, any potential future developers, to deal with the unseen but certainly there costs of remediation should they need to break into the asphalt-covered ground for any reason in order to construct a building or anything of that nature. And it's our view that simply putting a protective shell over it is not sufficient. And I understand that Mr. Rubenstein spoke to the difference between restoration and remediation. And certainly, given that it's 100 acres of 100 years and over 100 acres of contamination there, we understand that complete restoration is frankly not a realistic option. But there has to be some happy medium in between the two, as opposed to just doing bare minimum. This is provided to us from TCEQ. It shows, not sure if y'all can see, but right here you can see what is the cross-section that I'm about to show. You have Paisano here on the south, and the gray portion that you'll see right here is actually the slag that is sitting on top of the property, and you'll notice by the height measurements that you have over there on the left-hand side that in some portions of the slag it's as high as 75 feet high. And that figure is frankly astounding, but understandable given, again, that it's been there for 100 years and they've been smelting there for 100 years. But again, what that leaves is future remediation, and costs are going to have to be borne either by the community of El Paso or by potential developers to the site that should choose to utilize the property for future reuse. Additionally, and also a significant concern, is the fact that the cleanup proposed by the $52 million is limited to the 100-acre site that was discussed and in the image that was shown previously. You can see the image right here, or pardon me, I hope the yellow demarcation lines show up as on the image, but you'll notice right here, this is the main smelter site. Again, we have I-10, but this is all owned by Asarco and has been used as a dumping ground for slag fines for a number of years. Okay. So that property certainly is contaminated, and the $52 million figure, as discussed previously, is all for remediation of the 100-acre site to the west. In discussions with TCEQ, we understand that there was testing, I believe conducted by EPA early on when the concerns were brought to EPA in 2001. There was testing done, especially on this portion right here of the, the additional Asarco property, specifically due to its proximity to UTEP. And it's my understanding, come out of our meetings, that the reason that 55-acre site is shaded in red is that the levels of cadmium, arsenic, and lead were above the PCL levels and did raise concerns for you all. We brought this to the attention of EPA, and their response was effectively that TCEQ is the lead agency, as Ms. Sykes spoke about previously. And we brought these concerns to TCEQ, And the initial response was, well, we're likely going to be able to shift around some of the $52 million. By no means is the plan that they developed and spoke about previously absolutely prescriptive of what they must do. However, we don't view that shifting $52 million away from an area that had previously been budgeted is necessarily an appropriate response. An additional response that, again, Mr. Rubenstein spoke to is the fact that any sales and lease proceeds can be, or will be, shall be dedicated to additional remediation. But again, that's not guaranteed money. That money is not coming out of the bankruptcy settlement. That money is not going to be segregated away for the specific purpose of remediation of the smelter site. And then additionally, what came out of a meeting with TCEQ, that should funding not be available, should the $52 million be locked up in the 100-acre site, that a potential option for remediation would be power washing the rocks. And I'm not sure if that is an appropriate response that this community of El Paso is going to view as an actual remediation, in that there's certainly a number of factors that you have to take into consideration: runoff, whether or not simply power washing constitutes actual cleanup. So again, we urge y'all to take that into consideration when you are addressing the $52 million settlement figure and whether or not it is adequate. Again, this was spoke to briefly about the off-site cleanup, and while it's not exactly relevant here, we understand that it is coming to a close, and we just urge EPA to continue its oversight and continue to ensure that the homes that have been shown to need remediation the remediation is complete. And again, just to go over what I just said, we do want to ensure that what the community of El Paso is left with is actual develop ready, and it is not just simply pushing the added burden and future costs associated with true mediation onto a different source. We also want to ensure that the entirety of the of the Asarco property is addressed during remediation activities. And as Carlos spoke to, and as is the benefit of a meeting such as this, we want there to be community consensus around whatever the community decides is the future best and highest use of what is obviously a great piece of real estate, certainly from no other reason than location standards. But we want to make sure that it provides the future best and highest use, and that 10 years later we're not stuck with either a blighted property that no one decides to move into, or, God forbid, an additional Asarco. So.
Thank you, David, and
Thank
thank Senator Shapley for that. And now we're going to turn to the public comments, and I'm going to do this in the following way. I'm going to call in order the people in the order in which they've signed up. My count is we have approximately 20 people who've signed up. At 5 minutes a person, that's over 3 hours. But we're going to stay here and hear every single one of you. We're going to stay here until they kick us out and turn the lights off. Okay, so I'm just going to come up. I will try to respect the people who want to speak who didn't sign up first, and to give them an opportunity to speak. I will try to be pretty rigorous on the 5-minute rule. And I will give you a little wave of the hand or something as we're getting close to that, so you can wrap up. And I would appreciate it if to honor the people behind you, if you'll do that. We'll start with Al Soto. And I also apologize in advance for if I mispronounce your names, both because of your handwriting and more significantly because of my lack of ability to pronounce.
Let us begin. Welcome to the EPA, the Department of Justice, and the TCEQ. First of all, capping is not a solution. Remove it out of the city limits, out of the county limits. Is the $6 billion Asarco got going to be included in part of the settlement to correct this pollution? And this seems to be more, not a cleanup, but a cover-up if you're going to cap. So I'll begin. Asarco has not only destroyed the natural spring and lake, that wildlife that was there, but men and women have also been affected that lived there and near there. It has become the enemy and the destroyer of that was natural and part of nature, and continues as a threat to man's survival for decades into the future. Since 1930, it was determined that air pollution was already exacting a death grip on human and natural life. It was air pollution in 1930 that was deteriorating human survival on this planet. Asarco was doing it since 1898, not only contributing to global warming, but in full contribution to the demise of human and natural life existence. Not only asthma, emphysema, chronic bronchitis, sinusitis, allergies, but mental retardation, skin disease, blood poison, nerve damage, and now even in the future, the potential rise of cancer incidences in this region of 3 states and 2 countries. Asarco has sickened our biosphere and the future of unborn children. We do not want lip service. We want fairness and corrective measures for the next 100 years. Although Asarco's black fingerprint of death will be felt in many generations yet unborn, we still ask for fairness to both. Asarco, it seems, had no sense of ecology, global warming, or balance necessary to sustain human life, but was keen on profit, and the people be damned if not dead before they catch on to the damage that Asarco caused, is my opinion. Asarco asserted in 1971 that there is no direct link between air pollution and disease, per K.W. Nelson of Asarco and Dr. John Ebersold, who was Mr. Nelson's predecessor. 1971 they said this. The Texas Department of Health in 1968 state that the major pollutants were particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide. The Texas Air Control Board safety levels of 123 micrograms per cubic meter of air was the standard, yet of the 608 samples taken, 30% exceeded that standard. 28% were actually double the standard. Also, particulates of 50 microns or larger were not measured in the El Paso, Las Cruces, Juarez area. Since 1959, Asarco asserted no direct link between air pollution and disease, much less human poisoning. In 1963, the American Thoracic Society stated that there was a direct link between death by chronic bronchitis and emphysema and air pollution. This contrary to Asarco's statements by Dr. Nelson and Mr. Ebersol in 1971. Back in 1963, Dr. Ernest Winder of the Sloan Kettering Institute for Cancer Research produced cancer in animals by just painting them with material remains from filters exposed to New York City air. The air in El Paso was much higher.
1 minute.
So the issues are the cost, cleanup of the air, that's been done. Water has not been done. Earth, to be done. The cost of confidence and economic viability of the region and its safety, the cost of replacement of the job vacuum that Asarco leaves because they came, they took, and now want to leave an economic vacuum without economic redevelopment, the cost of job creation, and the cost of the administration of the aforementioned issues. What should be the cost? In Tacoma, 97 acres, 100 million. In Omaha, Nebraska, 23 acres, 150 million. My proposal: cleanup, $500 million to $1 billion. Water cleanup, $1 billion to $2 billion. Economic viability, $0.5 billion to $1 billion. Replacing the job vacuum, $0.5 to $1 billion. Administrative costs, the same. Total, $3.5 billion to $7 billion. But to be fair, let's make it $5.25 billion, and the potential cancer in the future, let's add another billion. So I request $6.25 billion. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Rick Provencio.
Hello, everybody. I am Rick Provencio. I'm sorry.
One minute. I want this.
I'll give it to you.
Okay. And we want to make sure that we're getting everything, so when you finish speaking, why don't you check in with our stenographer, make sure she has your name spelled in, okay? Go ahead, Rick.
I want to thank the Department of Justice, the EPA, and TCEQ for allowing us to meet here one more time. Hope you all like the shirt. I'm not a spokesman for the Sierra Club, but I couldn't find a Dallas Cowboys shirt that had this theme, so here we are. I've been in this fight for a long time. I started because of the contamination found in city property, residential property, stuff like that, and the attempt by some people to keep from taking it seriously and maybe even bringing it into a Superfund situation. Since then, though, and all these years later, it turns out that the contamination is not just in the properties, it's in the agencies that are there to supposedly watch out for us. We know better. If you learn anything from what I have to say, is that I would suggest that somehow you find it in your heart to allow the city of El Paso to prepare for and maybe come to the table and be part of a negotiation as far as the cleanup here, because putting a cap on it and leaving a big black mark in the middle of town that everybody sees, since they've shut down, people don't complain about the smell so much, but people remember driving through El Paso and the awful smell and stuff like that. But there's, Asarco owes it to this community to do better. DOJ, bankruptcy judges, all these people. We just had a permit session for many years, and we kept telling this TCEQ, whoever they are, that Asarco is not ready to go back into business. They need to be, they've been shut down long enough to be new source review, but do they listen to us? No, but it turned out that at least the EPA came to their senses and realized that that was a situation, and now you're asking us to trust TCEQ and EPA to decide what's good for this town. All I say is that I think maybe what you should do is consider including this town in any negotiations or any plans for coming up with a settlement of any kind. I don't know what else to say, and I think that's the most important part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Our next speaker is Daniel Arellano. Did I get that right, Mr. Arellano? No.
It was pretty close. My name's Daniel Arellano.
Arellano.
Okay, let me get my paper here. I'm going to read this so I won't miss a thing. Hey, good afternoon. I wish the Department of Justice was here because I wanted to say this to them. My name is Daniel Arellano, and I am a third-generation Asarco ex-employee. I belong to the ACORN organization, and I'm a spokesperson for the ill Asarco employees. I totally disagree with the proposed $50 million projected cost for the El Paso Asarco site, and here's why. The Asarco site would have to be dug down where it started 110 years to make this cleanup the cleanup it should be. There's air pockets. We lost a colleague there, probably in the 80s, where he was taking the slag to the dump, where they dump it on the side, and it buckled in, the slag came on his body, and he jumped out, all of the slag all the way up to his knees. He's lost his life in that air pocket. That's one of the examples of how the site is there. We're not talking about a smelter who ran just lead, copper, zinc, and cadmium, but who incinerated 5,000 tons of hazardous waste, 300 tons coming from the most contaminated mile on Earth, the Army Chemical Warfare Depot, the Rocky Mountain Arsenal. Let me clarify that the Rocky Mountain facility was not the only military facility involved, but there were many others. Many Asarco employees are ill, and many have passed on since the 1999 closure of the El Paso site. They suffer from cancers, rashes, blood and nervous system disorders. In 2006, we requested a congressional investigation in Washington, D.C. from the Honorable Congressman Sylvester Reyes, which was confirmed after a 9-month investigation. Here in my hand, I hold the Department of Justice settlement where the EPA states that the activity in the smelter was plain and simply illegal treatment and disposal of hazardous waste. It was agreed to pave roads, burn tires, and clean up resident yards, but not one word of the employees or the area residents, not only on this side, but in Mexico. Asarco never informed the region residents, much less much less did the employees ever commit to work with hazardous waste. I say to you today, representatives of the Department of Justice, in order to put a price tag on this cleanup, we need full transparency from the cradle to the grave of the activities and the contents of the materials involved. I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And what I'd like to do to make sure that everybody is prepared, I'm going to call the next person, and I'm going to list the next 2 or 3 in order so that everybody has a chance to be prepared. The next speaker is Juan Jurons, and after that is Carlos Rodriguez, and after that is Joe Pinion. But first, back to, I can't read your handwriting, sir. How do you pronounce your last name?
My name is Juan Garza,
Garda.
Garza.
Oh, that's an R. Okay, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Juan Garza. I want to thank you for the opportunity this venue provides. This allows me to express some of the concerns I have over the proposed settlement with Asarco. In 2001, EPA came out to El Paso and made a determination that Asarco was the primary responsible party. I lived in Sunset Heights for a great part of my life, and I have a house in Sunset Heights. Now, I'm concerned because EPA did come out and remediate the yard, but they did not remediate the indoor dust that was produced, the metals dust that was produced by the Asarco smelter. The lady that sits in this corner over here, her name is Teresa Montoya. She sits and represents Asarco. She received my complaint at a public meeting. She was provided analytical results that demonstrated that the dust contained in my house in the attic spaces was contaminated with arsenic. They received a pre-bankruptcy claim that they failed to report to the bankruptcy court. EPA Site Assessment Coordinator John Reinhardt was notified and provided results of a similar nature. Today, I'm here to remind you that the consent decree H99-1136 provided the EPA the opportunity to address areas of concern. These areas of concern are outside the boundaries of the Asarco smelter. I've talked to several people that are present here with Mr. Carlos Rubenstein from the TCQ and made a request that the EPA remediate the indoor dust produced by Asarco. So today, I stand before you to make another request to the EPA. I ask that the Environmental Protection Agency accept my preliminary assessment petition made under CERCLA, Section 105D, for the removal of contaminated dust produced and emitted by a Asarco facility. This smelter dust affects our living areas and our attic spaces. EPA Region 6 has failed to provide an adequate response, which includes testing, removal of materials which are potentially toxic to human health. I have today 5 petitions to pass out, and with this, I serve notice on you. May I approach you?
Thank you, sir. Why don't you, at the end of the meeting, talk to me and I'll take care of that with you, okay? Okay, our next speaker is Carlos Rodriguez, and after that, Joe Pinion. And then after Mr. Pinion, Consuela, and I can't, Raterina, I believe, but Mr. Rodriguez.
I have to laugh at your pronunciations.
I apologize.
I'd like to address my comments to the EPA. Terry Sykes? You know, she made mention about the El Paso smelter alleged treatment of hazardous waste. And it wasn't hazardous waste, it was toxic hazardous waste. She fails to mention the fact that this toxic hazardous waste came from the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, where Basin 16 is considered one of the most contaminated areas in the world. And I also think that Asarco made the decision to bring these wastes here to El Paso because of the population that they have. 85% Hispanic. I just have to question the fact that they didn't care. They didn't care what they did to us. I'm an ex-employee. We sit over here, 4 of us with over 100 years experience, and I apologize to the city of El Paso for working there for that many years. And this lady over here, Teresa Montoya, she recruited and paid people to come and say, I want to work for Asarco. I used to be one of those guys. I used to be a loyal employee. But when this company decided to poison us, they violated OSHA regulations, they violated EPA regulations, and they did it with no remorse. And that's, all that toxic hazardous material is still there. It's not just cleaning up lead and cadmium and arsenic and all that stuff. This is, according to the GAO report, there's 46,000 tons of toxic hazardous materials. You start moving the dust over there, you're going to recontaminate the city and the contractors that you hire. Every investigation report that I have read fails to mention the employees. We're not immune to this stuff. We're Hispanic. We also get sick, and we also are affected by these toxic hazardous materials. I don't think we deserve that treatment. I don't think El Paso deserves that treatment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Joe Pinion, and then Consuela Ratinira, and then after that, Mariana Chow, C-H-A or E-W. Okay, Mr. Pinion.
Good evening. My name is Joe Pignon.
Pinion.
I'm a pharmacist by profession. I know a little bit about science. And in the 50s, I recognized an awful lot of employees from Asarco who were sick and getting sicker. And I also recognized that various environmental agencies throughout the state, including the Texas Air Control Board and other agencies' names, predecessors to CEQ, looked the other way. The city looked the other way. The county looked the other way. And I got feeling that if ever I could go out and find out what the problems were and who were causing them, I was going to do it. Well, in 1992, I had an opportunity. Out of about 20-some people, I was one person who decided to have a contested case hearing in Austin. My son and I, who's an attorney here in El Paso, went to Austin and contested Asarco. During this contested case hearing, at the very last minute, Asarco produced a whole variety of documents that I think I should want to share you some information about them. And since there was a recent article published in the El Paso newspaper about the TCEQ Commission and Asarco having interactions that were perhaps illegal, if not illegal, they were immoral, I should mention a little bit about my experience dealing with Asarco, but more important, dealing with the TCEQ agency, which at the time in 1992 was called the Texas Air Control Board. Never published is the overt interaction that took place in 1992. I, along with my son Perry, who was a practicing attorney in El Paso, went to Austin to protest the permit that was being issued at the time. Asarco had promised the people of El Paso that they were going to install a state-of-the-art pollution control technology facility in El Paso. What El Paso and our neighboring communities received was an outmoded German technology, which was actually 30 years old at the time. Asarco's technology had been around in the third world countries 30 years, and it was being touted as best available control technology for El Paso. This is what people think about El Paso, and this is what people think about the Hispanic community here. We're perhaps uneducated, perhaps they feel that we can be the armpit of Texas, and therefore they can dump anything on us. Science was ignored during the Asarco contested case hearing in 1992. TCEQ toxicologists did not insist that the Asarco company present health impact studies on both sides of the border. The contested case hearing examiner maintained that the 1992 contested case hearing, that it had jurisdiction on air quality only. How ridiculous. Only interested in the air. They tried to consider that because the Asarco company had not done their homework and talked about lead in soil, cadmium in soil, and the other heavy metals in soil, that perhaps we weren't going to be concerned or interested enough about it to fight over that particular issue. But we were. During that hearing, Asarco produced a lead expert, and we hammered away at Asarco's failure to produce a lead impact health study on soil. With our back against the wall during the climaxing day of the hearing on a Friday, Asarco requested and was granted a recess to allow them time to respond to their failure to produce a lead and soil impact study. Right after that right after this, they requested a recess, and it was granted. The Asarco attorneys, in the presence of the TCEQ attorneys, offered my son and me $32,000 to withdraw from the hearing. No strings attached, they said, but they suggested we could use the money to test children for lead in their blood. Asarco's attorneys claimed that by delaying the hearing, it would cost them thousands of dollars per day. We agreed that this would be true, but this offer was insane. We did not go to Austin to a hearing to be bought. Testing children after the permit was granted made absolutely no sense. We were more convinced than ever that Asarco's failure to present lead and soil health impact evidence would spell out their legal deficit during that hearing.
Sir, about 1 minute.
During the granted recess, we wondered what would be Asarco's next move. My son and I debated, and between ourselves, what would possibly happen when the contested case hearing resumed on Monday. We believe there was no that there was no way out for Asarco's failure to produce a health impact study as required by the permit. On Monday, following the weekend recess, we were surprised by the new evidence, not by Asarco, but by TCEQ. TCEQ had ordered their chemists to analyze soil samples taken in 1989 that were stored at various sites. These were samples that had been tested for arsenic in 1989, 3 or 4 years prior to this particular date. Their chemists labored the whole weekend to try to erase an indelible failure. We were shocked, disappointed, and ruled that the TCEQ's hearing examiner, the equivalent of a judge in a court, was allowing these weekend tests to be admitted in a court in a contested case hearing. The hearing examiner was allowing the testimony of these chemists to satisfy Asarco's failure to substitute for a lead health impact study. Such a failure, any reasonable person would assume, would have denied Asarco the Countop expansion permit.
Sir, can you, for other people behind, could
Yes.
you please wrap up?
The application for a permit, 1992, required that the applicant provide a health impact study. Any reasonable and objective person would assume that Asarco's TCEQ was cranking up in desperation a report to satisfy a majority deficit in Asarco's plan. We argued that the Asarco surprise lead impact study should be impeached because of the many facts we pointed out. There are many other instances of TCEQ's failure. If they are the lead agency in this particular event now, in this saga, this Asarco saga, I would not trust them one bit, and I hope nobody in this room would, because they are not to be trusted. Now, what other agency could come to play, I don't know, but I would not trust Asarco any more than I could trust a politician who sells dead fish. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am. After Consuelo Retuer, how am I
Rentería.
Renteria. Our next is Mariana Chow. And then Bill Addington.
Mi nombre es Consuelo, y vengo de Ciudad Juárez,
My name is Consuelo, and I'm coming from the city of Juárez,
de la ladrillera de Juárez,
from the area of the Ladrillera de Juárez,
donde ha habido tanta gente afectada. La tierra está contaminada.
So many people have been affected there, and the soil is contaminated.
De hecho, nosotros anduvimos haciendo estudios
In fact, we were performing studies,
y tiene plomo,
and it has lead,
tiene arsénico.
arsenic.
Ahora quisiera saber qué más desechos tóxicos quemaron allí.
Now, I would like to know what other hazardous materials were burned there.
De hecho, ahí hay una escuela y sí nos preocupa porque hay demasiados niños.
In fact, there is a school nearby, and we're worried because there are a lot of children.
¿Qué es lo que va a pasar o qué desechos tóxicos más quemaron allí?
What is going to happen, and what other dangerous waste they burned there?
Y queremos saber qué es lo que va a pasar allí. Si van a limpiar aquí el paso, se supone qué es lo que va a pasar allá.
And that's all, and I would like to know what's going to happen over there. If the El Paso is going to be cleaned up, what's going to happen here?
Es todo. Gracias.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for coming. Okay, our next speaker is Mariana Chow, and then after is Bill Addington, and then Heather McMurray.
My name is Mariana Chu,
Chu.
and I'm a member of the Joint Advisory Committee for the improvement of air quality in the Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, El Paso, Doña Ana County, New Mexico. It's called the El Paso del Norte Air Basin, which this Joint Advisory Committee was established by the governments of the United States of America and the United States of Mexico to promote laws and regulations to improve and maintain air quality of the region. Well, there are too many resolutions from the Mexican side and at binational level. This is one of them, and this committee is an advisory committee created to help promote binational cooperation to improve air quality, sometimes through approaches that may go above and beyond existing statutory and regulatory authorities of the individual countries. And well, it costs, I have very little time, but one of the main points that they ask the Joint Advisory Committee is to enhance public knowledge and awareness by providing for independent review and interpretation of data and studies related to Asarco. And it talks about the too many concerned citizens, the trust of the citizen has been undermined by past findings of illegal hazardous waste processing and legacy effects of previous operations. And it talks about this committee recognizes health risk resulted from combinations of past and scenarios, et cetera, et cetera. Well, but the most important that for me is that I'm gonna. I don't know if I'm allowed to read this because it's too little time, but I'm here in behalf of the Congress of Chihuahua and the Mexican Federal Congress. They demand that the U.S. EPA to honor the La Paz Agreement in Mexico be included in all remediation and restoration decisions, and demand indemnization for all the affected, including Sunland Park in Mexico. And here I have with me unanimous resolutions from the Congress of Chihuahua, from the City of Juárez, and from the Federal Mexican Congress. And the main point is that they demand that the affected neighborhoods in Mexico had to be taken in account. And they go for many, many pages about that the U.S. government has to honor the La Paz Agreement, and I didn't see any mention of that in previous from.
Thank you. Your comments, as I said to, and I say this to everybody, your comments are on the record, and the United States government is obligated to answer your comments in response to this in their public response.
In Mexico, it's not only demanding for responses for Mexico, but for Sunland Park and El Paso. And as I told you, there are many resolutions by national context and demand remediation and restoration for El Paso del Norte community. There is no borders for the pollutants.
Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, our next is Bill Addington. And after Bill Addington is Heather McMurray and then Debbie Kelly.
Thank you, sir. Yes, as you stated, my name is Bill Guerra Addington. With others today, I'm representing the Rio Grande chapter of the Sierra Club, which encompasses all of New Mexico and El Paso and Hudson counties. Sir, you stated that there's approximately 20 speakers at 5 minutes apiece. That's 100 minutes, not 3 hours. That'd be approximately an hour and a half, which is kind of irrelevant when some of us here have been waiting a decade or more to tell the EPA and the Department of Justice how we feel. So I think it's quite inappropriate to limit the speakers to 5 minutes, rushing people like Joe Pinon here that has been working tirelessly on behalf of this community and doing a lot of work to protect the health and safety of all of us, including future generations. And to me, it's a complete insult to limit Mr. Pinon to 5 minutes, or anyone else here. I don't understand where the gentleman sitting up here from the Department of Justice and the EPA, I do notice some of the TCEQ employees sitting down. It's always strange speaking to a empty room of speakers except for the audience. Of course, we always know that we're speaking more to the audience than we are to the people in the front anyway. In any case, there's a lady sitting over here, Heather McMurray, who's a good friend of mine, that brought out in October of 2006 documents that had been sealed, confidential, and secret by the United States Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Justice. These settlement documents were sealed as an agreement that Asarco would only pay a small fine, a few $1 million, and the paving of some roads here in El Paso. I've read several times this alleged hazardous waste burning. And
But this won't count on your time. Let's wait for the clock.
I understand. I sit here at City Council all the time. This alleged hazardous waste burning is nothing alleged about it. It is completely documented in the documents obtained by Ms. McMurray that were begrudgingly given by TCQ. They fought with her for weeks, the top attorneys, to get this document, the settlement document. Finally, someone in the Department of Justice ordered it sent to Ms. McMurray and ordered TCQ to send it. It was overnight mailed. The next month after that, after we digested it, I recommended to Ms. McMurray that we issue a national press release, not just one local, which we did within 1 hour of us issuing our press release regarding the secret and hazardous waste burning held since 1999 for these thousands of tons of hazardous waste. A reporter, Ralph Blumenthal, picked it up in 1 hour, was curious, and as you probably know, this became an article in the front page of the New York Times, October 6, 2006. So I don't understand why we keep hearing alleged hazardous waste burning. This 100 and some odd page document details some of what we know, that materials burned from the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, from NASA, from private industry, DuPont. Many things were unmanifested. So I think it's the EPA's and the Department of Justice's job now to fully disclose what they know. For too long, we've had the EPA and the TCEQ, which on many ways I blame more than Asarco. You guys led Asarco, you enabled them to operate without a permit for 10 years to burn hazardous waste. This wasn't just for their own materials. They were bringing it from Encycle and Corpus Christi for 9 years that we know of. an illegal hazardous waste burner that they made millions of dollars off of as a profit-making venture. They knowingly and illegally broke federal and state laws. They should be prosecuted criminally, and yet they never have been. Because they knowingly violated state and federal environmental laws, knowingly did it, and with apparent okay by these agencies, because we know that that they had to have known about it, as it was, trainloads and trainloads over a 9-year period being shipped here. At a minimum, there's zero oversight. At a maximum, they knew about it and did nothing about it because they didn't care, or they just wanted but anyway, a lot of people are suffering here, sir, and whoever else listening. I have a lot of friends in the International Boundary Water Commission that are sickened employees over there. Carlos Marin was a personal friend of mine that cared very much for his employees and the people of El Paso. He has, as you know, the Boundary Commission has a claim in the bankruptcy court for all their contaminated property, the American Dam, a lot of their office building, and property along the border there on the river that they, around Asarco. Also, Border Patrol employees are sickened every day sitting there at that site. So, I just don't know. Hopefully the purpose of this meeting will be, will we even be heard or be taken into account, or will this be another case of where the public vents their spleen, we all say what we have to say, then you guys go home, and then business as usual, all that's going to be given out is $52 million, when in fact a smaller site in Washington they've spent $100 million, the EPA there, $100 million, 10 years, and it's still not cleaned up. A lot smaller site. So just to let you know, we're sitting on a lot of documents. The groundwater contamination of that site is of prime importance. The American Canal sits within 100 feet of that site. There's a significant pollution coming and entering into the American Canal, which is 60% of the drinking water supply of El Paso. The Rio Grande is being contaminated. The TCEQ and EPA have known this, but only recently are they admitting it on their website. The zone of contamination extends near the entire site, groundwater contamination, yet I see nothing of controlling surface water, which should have been done a long time ago. The surface water running through that site in the '06 flood caused their rubber lake to overflow, the water running into the American Canal, and some of the Canal Street treatment plant picking it up, vast amounts of arsenic and probably other metals, until they finally shut it off. So this toxic and hazardous waste is continuously leaching up into the 100-year-old or 80-year-old American Canal, and we hope that our drinking water is protected, and protected a lot more than some cause of this real estate that everyone's going on about. It's valuable real estate. To many people here is our health and safety and the protection of our groundwater, not for the future use of some elevated toll road that they want to build up there, or some development because it's a valuable piece of property. So with that, I just hope that the EPA and the Department of Justice, I know there's good people working at the EPA, I know some of them myself, that were there since President Nixon started the EPA. I'm not down on the EPA completely. There are good employees there are good people at TCEQ, and there are good people at the Department of Justice. In fact, one attorney ordered that document I mentioned sent to Ms. McMurray, which didn't allege any hazardous waste burning, but documented and proved that this had been going on for 10 years. So I just hope that there will be some justice, and they will look at providing a lot more than $52 million. It would probably take at least $350 to $500 million. Maybe Mr. Soto's right. Maybe it's billions. I don't know. But in any case, that is an extremely large area of contaminated property, and something must be done about it, and something must be done to protect our groundwater from chemical weapons contamination that's been burned there, other hazardous waste that have been burned down. Trainloads and trainloads and trainloads of hazardous waste were burned at this site for 9 years, atop of the 110 years of smelting that were done, and then, of course, the Contop custom smelter that they installed in 1992 was, in my opinion, nothing more than a way to set up an illegal hazardous waste incinerator. With that, I'll stop.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your comments. Heather McMurray, And after Heather McMurray, Debbie Kelly, and Jim Kelly, in that order.
Are you with the Department of Justice, sir?
No, ma'am. I'm a private facilitator. I work as an environmental mediator and facilitator around the country, mediating and facilitating mostly hazardous waste issues, but all other kinds of environmental and policy issues.
Who pays you?
I'm under a subcontract with a firm called SRA International, and EPA pays them and they pay me, so essentially EPA.
Thank you. Is the Department of Justice still here?
Yes, all the agency people are here.
I think the people have spoken before me, have said most of what I would like to say. I really don't know at this point what to say to the people from the EPA, the TCEQ, and Department of Justice. If you notice, the people from Sunland Park are not here. They've been trying to get answers for 2 years from New Mexico, from the EPA, from the governor of New Mexico, and other environmental authorities to the contamination from Asarco in their community. As we've heard from people in Juarez, the contamination went to Mexico, and it went the opposite direction, primarily to Sunland Park. And this had been documented as far back as the early 1980s. For 2 years, we've been trying to get answers, and we haven't been able to get them. My name is Heather McMurray, and I've been researching Asarco for 5 years. I've done numerous open records requests, FOIA requests, and in all that time, I've not been able to find out answers to simple questions. And as you can tell, it's not an easy thing. How much chromium-6, hexavalent chromium, is here? It was in the 1994 permit. How much dioxin? I've been told it's here, so why test for it? From a very prominent EPA person. How much PCBs are here? Polonium, radioactive lead, which is common to smelters. How much of that is here? How much mercury is here? How much actinides are here? These are not unreasonable questions. And the toxic waste incinerator in East Liverpool, Ohio, routinely publishes information like this, but we don't have it. I've been researching this for 5 years. And that's just the beginning of the unknowns. As Bill mentioned, we found out in 2006 from the EPA and the DOJ, the Department of Justice, confidential settlement document that had been held secret from this community 8 years, just how much had been held secret. And there's still more secret. Most of the toxic wastes were not manifested. We don't know what they were. They were brought in for secret disposal and no metals recovery. And it was done for profit, the EPA said. We now know Asarco's wastes are in the International Hueco Bolson and the Rio Grande. We know that Sunland Park, New Mexico, and Mexico get most of the plume, or got most of the plume, most of the time from Asarco, and their questions remain unanswered. We know that this Asarco bankruptcy is a fraud because the court is acting as if this secret toxic waste incineration never happened. Yet the EPA and the Department of Justice said it happened, and Representative Reyes is on record as saying that Asarco paid money to keep the community from finding out the truth. It happened. The U.S. Department of Justice trustee for the Corpus Christi Bankruptcy Court is not making the court consider this truth and consider Asarco's real liabilities from this secret waste. And yet, the EPA, the TCEQ, and the DOJ are here in our community acting as if this were all normal procedure to get our community responses on this bankruptcy and accept $52 million for a cleanup that likely would be in the billions. It is in our homes, our lungs, our soils, our stormwater, our river, and our children here. And we ask you today again. Now we have a new presidential administration to begin by being truthful about the toxic waste and telling us what is here from Asarco's illegal activities. We've asked over and over and over again for 5 years. Please start by being truthful. Start by telling us what is here. Anything else, in my opinion, I am not an attorney, this is my opinion, it's a fraud. And even if you do not want to deliver honest services to this community, if you don't want to, then you owe it to us to recuse yourselves, to step aside and let honest people deal with this problem so we don't have it carried into further generations, generation after generation, affected by this, having cancers, sicknesses, who knows what else it brings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Debbie Kelly? And then Jim Kelly, and then Nisha Harden. Ms. Kelly.
Hello, my name is Deborah Kelly, and I am a member of the Get the Lead Out Coalition, and I'm also a concerned citizen of El Paso, Texas, born and raised here. And mine will be short. Basically, there are many issues to talk about, but I'll just focus on a few. We all know that the funds, we all seem to agree that the funds are not going to be enough to cover what we need cleaned here in El Paso. I mean, $52 million doesn't begin to cover the cleaning of the water and the on-site and off-site property around Asarco, because the contamination just didn't stop at the fence or at the borders, for that matter. So we are requesting at least $250 million, if not more. The other concern I have is that if EPA, I didn't see where EPA was going to have an oversight in the cleanup. And that really concerns me because TCEQ has shown us in the past that they really don't care much about the health of the people of El Paso. We've gone out to Austin and we've been to the hearings and we saw how we were totally ignored. And so we have no faith in the TCEQ. We're hoping that the EPA will please look out for our interest here, and the DOJ's look out for interest. The other thing I would like to mention is I would like to see the stacks taken down because I am concerned that another contaminating industry will come and use those in the future. And they should be tested before they're taken down so that we can know what El Paso and the people here have been contaminated with, along with Juarez and New Mexico. And please put money aside for the Asarco employees who have been affected. They have high medical bills and they need to be looked after because they're the ones that were in the middle of it, just doing their jobs, and they were not told, you know, the contamination that they were dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, Jim Kelly, and then Noisha Harden.
My name is Jim Kelly. That was my wife, Deborah. I'm very proud of her. I was proud of her 5 years ago when she stood up and became a member of the affected parties and fought against Asarco. And by the way, we were successful at that. And there is no Asarco in this town anymore, and there won't be. But there's still a little work to be done, a lot of cleanup to be done. I'm not only proud of Debbie, though. I'm proud of everybody that's spoken so far and all the rest of the folks that you're likely to hear from. You know, I'm proud to associate myself with Charlie Rodriguez's anger and with Mariana Chu's binationalism. I'm proud to be associated with Joe Pignon and his long-standing steadfastness in his fight against this enemy to the health of our community. I support Al Soto's poetry and the way he talks about these issues. No one can fail to be moved by the words that he uses. I support Bill Addington's passion, his frustration, his anger, his intelligence, his articulateness. You've got an awful lot of folks here in this room that have been paying attention to this issue for a long time, and there's been a lot of poor treatment of the community and of the people, unfortunately, by you all. Not that much trust. And why would we, when we've been lied to and when we've been mistreated, ignored, and basically we've been at war with everybody, and only after many battles have we finally succeeded up to this point. But we're not finished, and we're going to continue to fight until such time as the 75 feet of slag is taken down and disposed of, not covered up. We need for that to take place. We need for the workers that have worked here for all these years, for their health to be assessed legitimately, and for their concerns to be resolved. We need for that smokestack to come down. We need for the standards that you use to clean this site to be not the minimal standards, but high standards. The people in this town deserve it. We're not going to end up with a polluted site in the middle of our community. That is going to go. That's going to be gone. And you're going to help us make it happen. We want some more money, $52 million. You've got to be kidding. That's just not going to happen, right? So when that doesn't make it, and you all are required to then say, well, it didn't work, and the city's still not clean, we are then going to have you stand up with us and help us to get the rest of the money that's going to be needed. Because we're not going to quit until it's done. And if it takes $300 million, or if it takes $500 million, or if it takes Al's $6.5 billion, we're going to stick with it, and we're going to ask for your help along the way to make sure that it happens.
Sure.
There's some of us that have a lot of hopefulness in the present time because there's always a need for hope, and there's always a willingness for people to hope and expect good things to come, and we want to be there, and we don't want to just be fighting with everybody all the time. But we will fight with you if you don't give us what we want, but we would rather embrace you and work with you to make our community the jewel that it should be. So help us out. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next is Nisha Harden, and then after that, I can't read, Dr. Basil, can't read the writing here, and then Matt Carroll. So, Nisha Harden? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Nisa Harden,
Yes.
and I would like to address a few issues that have, I will be mostly echoing what has been said today. But when we look and we anticipate a $52 million cleanup, and we look at precisely that sites such as Omaha and Tacoma were over $200 million each, it just seems that the El Paso cleanup site is being gravely underfunded. And so here we go, standing again with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. We stood with you and we listened to you deny what the administrative law judges had recommended many years ago, several years ago, to not even allow this plant to receive an air permit. But yet, you defied your own administrative law judges and granted an air permit to Asarco. And we're supposed to stand next to you and expect that you will truly clean up and remediate this property? It's doubtful. We don't trust the TCEQ. So who do we have to depend on? Well, we did see EPA in April declare that the Asarco site was worthy of scrap metal. And with that in mind, we have to, I guess, put any faith in the EPA that you will oversee the TCEQ and have them do the proper thing and demand that we really do need more than $52 million. It really is chump change. I mean, come on, $52 million is not that much money to clean such a large site. A minimum of 250 million, I think, would be to be expected. We do have a few demands that we'd also like to have recorded. First of all, we want this entire process to be transparent. That is the American way. Secondly, we want the Asarco workers, we would like to see the Asarco workers have their health care restored and also have funding to help them see their medical bills. Thirdly, the stacks need to be torn down. End of story. In fact, Tacoma is tearing four of their stacks down this week. Let's have ours join them. And also, I would like for us to investigate exactly what illegal material, the hazardous material, was burnt on this site. So, and also that our groundwater be cleaned. I am pleased to see that it does have the highest amount of funding in this 52 million, but yet we still need to see some more for that groundwater. I think it's kind of silly to think in 50 years we might get clean water. So, thank you. We appreciate you listening and hearing our concerns. And as Jim said, we would like to embrace this process, but if this process is corrupt, we will fight it.
Thank you, ma'am. The next is Dr., and I can't read. Could you help me with your name?
Busselberg.
I beg your pardon?
Busselberg.
Could you spell that for?
Sure. B-U-S-S-E-L-B-E-R-G.
Thank you.
Okay. As you can hear, I'm a recent addition to El Paso, so you may wonder why I'm standing up here. I guess the reason is very simple. I'm dealing with metal toxicity for the last 25 years, and actually, I'm shocked. I'm shocked about the data you gave us, and I'm shocked how you want to treat El Paso. Did you consider, when you look at arsenic, mercury, lead, you always put it in one pot? These are metals. They exist in different ways. You have the organic metals, the inorganic metals in a lot of different ways. They all will interact very differently with the environment and with human health. Did you consider that in your plan? You want to dig it in? They will be biotransformed. The inorganic metals make it violent. They get in the air. We breathe it. And then you put a few pumps around the site to pump up, and then you say, we clean the water. We want to get, they really appreciate that part. We want to get down to the level of drinking water, which is good. I still have a little problem with that because the data, which are valid today, as a metal toxicity, we are challenging them for the last decade. They are too high. But anyhow, let's say those data are valid. Considering all the different metal species which are in there, they all need a specific, very specific treatment to get them out of the drinking water. These are immense costs. Honestly, to my knowledge, we don't even have that technique today. So that will be a huge investment to get that down for all the different metal species to the drinking water quality. I'm impressed if you get that. And then I'm looking at all the data here, and I'm shocked again. I'm shocked for the very simple reason. Do you consider all the population here in El Paso, which are exposed to this for decades? Many of them may have metal levels in their blood, in their body, which may be not as obvious toxicity, but it's there. And I really demand a screening of the population here. And when we've done the screening, we may consider what they need in health plans. And this is especially true for the workers. And again, for that, I guess we need a whole amount of money. And I would really like to see that to be into the plan. And that is established, and the environment is clean, I will be happy. Thank you very much for your considering my thoughts.
Thank you very much, sir. Our next speaker is Matt Carroll.
Good evening. My name is Matt Carroll, C-A-R-R-O-L-L, and I've called El Paso my home for almost half a century. During that time, I've always lived within less than 2 miles and sometimes less than 1 mile of the smelter, so I've followed all of this with considerable interest. The speakers who have preceded me have covered many of the topics very thoroughly, but I will add, without duplicating whenever possible, first of all, I'd like to reiterate the importance of retesting for other heavy metals and other possible toxins which are not normally part of the byproducts of the smelting process, since it's been brought out that materials of unknown materials have been brought in from outside and disposed there. I just learned for the first time about that remote contaminated area, the one that was shown more or less in the upper left part of the slide that was shown at the beginning of this presentation, from which 20,000 cubic feet are supposed to be placed into cell number 4, which will be constructed. Now, they gave the staggering parts per million for well-known toxic metals that are a normal byproduct of the smelting process, but have they tested for other metals that might have come from materials brought in from outside? I say that the top priority should be to retest for any long-term toxins that may have been deposited there. Only then will we know what needs to be done for cleanup. As for the cost, I wouldn't even venture a guess there, but obviously the amount stated there would be a drop in the bucket compared to the true cost of a real cleanup. Now, I would like to say that the people of El Paso, both directly through these kind of meetings and through their elected representatives, should have input in every step of this process as it evolves. Also, regarding the credibility of TCEQ, I can quote a much more recent example. We have learned in the news that our Senator Shapley, who was valiantly giving very heavily of his time in this process, has been denied some documentation by the TCQ that he specifically improperly requested. I think if TCQ is to regain any credibility at all with the people of El Paso, they should immediately and forthwith provide him with any of the records and documentation that he requests, which certainly is within his duties as well as his rights. Now, as far as the eventual disposition of this land, I'm just going to offer one suggestion. If part of it is permanently capped, we can still use the area above it for solar and wind power generation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, let me give a list of names. We're going on to another page. And again, it's not too late if any of you want to sign up to speak and you haven't done so. I want to make sure before we leave here tonight that anybody who wants to speak has that opportunity. So the next speakers that I have are Lawrence Gibson and Bob Geyer and then Jane Ratcliffe. But we'll start with Lawrence Gibson.
Good evening. Thank you very much for being here. I'm chairman of the El Paso Regional Group of the Sierra Club. I'm a 40-year El Paso resident. As a matter of fact, I spent 40 years traipsing across the UTEP campus, 30 smelling and spitting that yellow stuff. A couple of things that we'd like to emphasize tonight. We feel like your plan is merely a Band-Aid, and we look around and we see other smelter renovations which have run $250, $300 million, and we wonder why El Paso should settle for 50. Well, one thing that 40 years in El Paso has taught me is that nobody looks out for us here. We cannot count on the people in the rest of Texas. We are the armpit where what they don't want to deal with ends up. So we are going to fight to get our 300 million or 250 or whatever it takes. And the reason we think that your plan is a Band-Aid is because, you know, our community standards have changed a lot. There were many years where it was acceptable to have a smelter here. In 2005 already, we said no longer acceptable. We think that remediation will no longer be acceptable. If it is at all, even at this point, we know 10 years from now, our citizens are going to be pushing for renovation. As Senator Shapley's Edmondson mentioned earlier, you know, your plan is only dealing with remediation, and we think that your plan needs to be forward-looking because today's remediation is going to be tomorrow's renovation. So please, no Band-Aids for El Paso.
Thank you, sir. Bob Geyer?
Thank you. My name is Bob Geyer. I'm on the executive committee of the Sierra Club, but I would be here regardless, even if I wasn't. I remember tasting that smut that Mr. Gibson talked about as a sophomore taking tennis at the university, and thank God I transferred to the University of Houston. Didn't have to do that anymore. Some things in the presentation concern me. When you listed lead, cadmium, and arsenic, I could not believe that the 14,000 parts per million of lead was found at the site. I mean, that is just unbelievable. And yet you all only want to spend, what is it, 52,000 cleaning up the site? Another question I'd like answered, I thought before I came here tonight that a portion of that was going to be used for Amarillo. Don't know, maybe somebody could say that later, but that was going around town.
I just want to correct one thing. It was 52 million.
What did I say, million?
You said 1,000, but...
1,000, okay, well, it's almost the same. 52 million, but I'd still like to know about if that included Amarillo, because that was going around. Another thing that concerned me was in the groundwater figures, the only reason that was cited was the arsenic level was indicated was very high. But what about the cadmium and the lead? That was not even used as a reason to clean up the groundwater. So, you just look at that slide and you say, well, they sure ignored those other metal figures, which are in the water. Also, what really concerned me, and Jim Kelly brought this up, that the site is only being cleaned up, what I read on the slide, commercial and industrial levels. So that means we're stuck with a commercial or industrial level, even if they were cleaned up properly. I mean, that's a poor remediation concept. It should be cleaned up so that people could live on that site if people so chose in the future. It's prime area. We talk about urban sprawl. If we could clean that up pristine, that would be great. Have people actually live on there, play on there. So capping it up as just a commercial industrial site. El Paso, we should not accept that, and we won't. And the solution, I find, because of the hazardous waste there, and because of not being the full site, is not being even looked at or nothing done with it. And I'm real concerned about these 4 cells that are going to be left there with these highly toxic, metals and toxins and whoever knows came from the hazardous waste. What are these going to become? Are we supposed to worship these fuel cells? I mean, are they going to be sticking out of the air 50 feet or something? Are we going to paint them different colors and we can put some different graffiti on them? I just can't imagine these 4 fuel cells that we're all going to have to be driving around or avoiding because they're going to be contaminated from miles away. We want the whole site cleaned up and not have these 4 fuel cell monstrosities to look at for future years. And also, this has been said before, but we can't trust the TCEQ, and I don't know who the hell you trust. But I mean, right now, as was mentioned, Senator Shapley's trying to get information about them dealing secretly with the Asarco lawyers during the operating permit situation, during the permit process. If it didn't happen, then why is TCEQ not willing to release the records? Obviously, they're pointing a finger at themselves. They don't want to release it, to me, they're guilty. And then way back with the hazardous waste that was being burned, we cannot trust TCEQ, nor do we. So they're approving the 52 million, here we go again. The 52 million is ludicrous, okay, so we don't trust them. We do trust Senator Shapley's office, Mr. Edmondson and his staff for actually looking into what would be required. And at a minimum, based on their research, which is a lot better than mine certainly, we support the 250 million to do an adequate job of not just cleaning this up to the commercial and industrial standards. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Jane Ratcliffe. After Jane is Raul Ayana, and then James Ratcliffe.
My name is Jane Ratcliffe, and I am a substitute for my son who had to leave, and I apologize. So James will not speak.
So James will not be here?
No.
Okay.
Welcome to a very difficult subject. Much money has already been spent on this problem, and I am approaching it from a different direction. The closing was a real shame. El Paso has many other pollution areas that have not been addressed. There's a real history in this area, and to destroy the buildings is, I feel, criminal. I would pray instead of a hotel or shopping center or parking lot that you use the facilities for a museum and clean up the area so that that could be used. It would be a rarity. No place in the United States has such a thing. And then also include an amusement center. That way you would have two for the price of one, and it would be a real attraction along I-10. It would be certainly an addition to El Paso. I don't know if this idea would be feasible, but I would hope that you all would look at it. Destroying the facility would destroy the home of many ghosts. And I don't know if you know that there are a lot of ghosts in Asarco, and also the El Paso history. I want to thank you for the time that you've given me to express these ideas for the future. And one added thing that my son wanted, a request, that there be an examination of how much pollution and contamination come from where it is. Thank you again, and I'm glad you're in El Paso.
Thank you, ma'am.
God bless.
Our next speaker is Raul Amya. Let me just go through, after Raul, we have, as far as I know, 3 more speakers. Juanito Jimenez, I think. Lorenza, I can't read the last name here, and Kathleen Zerlind. So if anybody else wishes to speak, I do not want to shut this off until everybody who's here has an opportunity to speak. So,
good evening, everyone. My name is Raul Amaya. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you with my concerns about this proposed amount of money to clean up Asarco. I'm a lifelong resident of El Paso. First of all, I just want to echo the statements made by Congressman Reyes, Senator Shapley's representative, and all those who have spoken in opposition to Asarco and the paltry sum that is being proposed to clean up Asarco's mess. Like them, I believe I believe that $52 million proposed by the TECQ, who many El Pasoans have no faith in, will prove to be totally inadequate, especially inasmuch as that amount of money does not address the remediation of the health damages done to many of Asarco's employees, some of them who are here with us this evening. I believe that the sum that Senator Shapley's staff has come up with is much more likely the amount of money that's going to be required to clean up this mess that Asarco did. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Mr. Dozier,
Yes, ma'am.
forgive me. I need people to start spelling their names for me.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for asking. I will do that. Our next speaker, as far as I understand it, and if you'll spell your name, it's Juanita, is that correct? Jimenez?
Jovita Jimenez.
Okay, would you spell that?
As soon as she's ready,
Yes.
en cuanto deletree su nombre.
One moment
empieza.
while we-
Un momento, señora, ahorita le digo cuándo. Okay, Jovita Jimenez, last name is Jimenez. Okay, puede empezar a hablar, señora, y despacio.
Muy buenas tardes.
Good evening.
Mi nombre es Jovita Jiménez.
My name is Jovita Jimenez.
Yo quisiera nada más preguntar. Yo vengo de Juárez, tengo años viviendo allí.
I would like to ask the following. I am coming from Juárez, and I've been living in Juárez for so many years.
¿Qué va a pasar? Yo oigo que van a limpiar aquí.
What is going to happen? I hear that this area is going to be cleaned up.
¿Y en Juárez cómo vamos a quedar? Los enfermos que hay en Juárez.
And what is going to be
¿Qué
the
va a pasar?
situation in Juárez? The ill people in Juárez, what is going to happen?
He estado en la corte, hemos ido a Austin, un grupo bastante de gente. Ahorita nada más venimos 3 personas de Juárez.
I've been in court, we've been to Austin, so many of us, but right now, only 3 of us are present from Juárez.
Levantamos firmas y todo para Asarco, que se quitara de allí. Nada más se quita, se limpia aquí El Paso. ¿Y Juárez? ¿Dónde quedamos? Los niños que están enfermos, las personas que están enfermas, ¿qué va a pasar con ellos?
Permítame.
¿Qué va a pasar en Juárez?
Permítame. We got a lot of signatures together, and we're asking what is going to happen in Juárez. Asarco is going to be cleaned up. What's going to happen to the people in Juárez? What is going to happen to the children in Juárez? Algo más.
Quisiera que se quedaran con la pregunta que me hago yo por todos los enfermos, por mí misma, porque también tengo nietos, tengo bisnietos ahí que están en las escuelas. ¿Y qué va a pasar con ellos?
I would like to
¿Qué con-
consider the question I'm asking because for myself, I have children, I have grandchildren, and what's going to happen with the children at the schools?
Let me explain, maybe there's a little explanation I can
Déjeme
give
le explico, a lo mejor puede que haya algo de explicación que yo le pueda dar.
so you understand the
Para
process
que
here.
entienda el proceso aquí.
Today's meeting
La audiencia de
is
hoy
for people
es
to ask
para que
questions
las
and make
personas hagan
statements.
preguntas y declaren lo que piensan.
Your statements are being
Declaración
written down.
se está escribiendo.
Those questions you ask
Preguntas que usted está haciendo ahorita.
and the statements you make
Las
will be
declaraciones que
read
usted hizo
and
se van a
analyzed
leer y se van a analizar
by the EPA
por el EPA
and the Justice
y el
Department
Departamento
and the
de Justicia
Texas
y
CEQ.
el Departamento del TCEQ.
Answers to those
Las
questions
respuestas a esas preguntas
and the agency's analysis of your
y el
comments
análisis de las agencias que van a tener en cuanto a sus comentarios
will be provided later
se le van a dar más tarde
in writing
por escrito
and will be made public. You'll be able to, and at the end of the meeting, we'll put the website address up on a piece of paper up here, so people will be able to know where to
que
look
la gente sepa
when the
dónde
agency
entrar cuando la agencia
responses
responda
to the comments made tonight
comentarios hechos
are published.
hoy Cuando esto se publique. Very well.
Okay?
Muy bien.
Does that help?
Muchas
ayuda?
gracias.
Thank you very
Muchas
much.
gracias.
Thank you very much. Lorena Granota? After that, Kathleen Zerlin,
Granada.
and then Gil Pignon.
Okay, Lorena Gandara, Gandari.
Gandari.
Oh, A.
Mm.
Muy bien, señor. Empieza. Despacio.
Buenas tardes.
Good evening.
Yo soy Lorena Gándara López.
I am Lorena Gandara Lopez,
Vengo de Ciudad Juárez.
and I'm coming from the city of Juárez.
Yo soy madre. Estoy preocupada por mis hijos
I am a mother, and I'm worried about my children
porque ahí cerquita del Asarco está una escuela.
because close to Asarco there is a school.
Se llama Educando a la Niñez.
The name of it is Educando a la Niñez.
Y traigo a mi hija porque ella es falta de aprendizaje.
And I have my daughter with me because she doesn't learn well,
Y estoy preocupada por ella.
and I am worried about her.
¿Cómo le hicieron para intimar los costos si ni siquiera sabemos exactamente qué pasó?
How did you do it? How did you estimate the cost for the cleanup if we don't even know exactly what happened?
Que se quemó ilegalmente.
What was burned illegally?
¿Cómo le hicieron para intimar al costo sin tomar en cuenta a los más atentados que somos nosotros?
How do you do it to estimate the cost of the cleanup if you didn't take into account the most affected? That's us.
Los que vivimos en Ciudad Juárez y en Salapar.
And those are we, the ones that live in Sunland Park and in Juárez.
Es todo. Gracias.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Kathleen, and how do you pronounce your last name?
Zerlinden?
Oh, I got it close. Zerlinden.
Yes,
And
you were-
would you spell that for our stenographer, please?
It's Zurlindden. Good evening, TCEQ, Department of Justice, and dear friends. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Kathleen Anna Zerlinden, and I would like you to take a good, hard look at me. There are 20,000 more like me right across the street at the University of Texas at El Paso, not to mention faculty and staff who are within 1 mile of the Asarco site. According to statistics, anything within a 20-mile radius is directly affected by the harmful contaminants that have come out of the smokestack. I'm a student that has been fighting Asarco for the last 6 years. I have rode a bus overnight with Danny and Charlie and many of the people that have spoken here to speak with you. And several times, the permit has been renewed and our request has been denied. But as a student, I am here to talk to you, and I hope you will listen, and I hope you will see us. Many others who have been horribly affected by this have been lied to and hurt by the horrible things that Asarco has done. And all I can say is, how dare you come to us with such a pathetic offer of $52 million and even have the audacity to consider this an excessive amount. What my question is, why is the possibility of restoration such an impossibility? I think our students here in El Paso in the future deserve to have clean air, clean land, and clean water. I would like to know what the price tag of restoring this land would be, and the price tag of what the beautification of El Paso would cost. I would like to know so that perhaps we in El Paso, who care about our land, may pay for it if need be, since we have always footed Asarco's bill anyway. And so on behalf of the students who have fought a great deal of time against Asarco, who could not be here tonight, and those that could, and all of those who have been fighting this, I would just like to let you know this fight does not end here. I'm a criminal justice major, and many of us will be graduating soon, and this fight will continue on until this land is fully cleaned and until something beautiful is built there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Gil Pignon?
I know the hour's late, so I'll
No.
keep these comments
And
brief.
again, spelling your name, sir, for our stenographer?
Yeah, Gilbert Pignon, P-I-N-O-N. I am a teacher here in El Paso, and I serve on the executive committee of the Sierra Club. Because I'm a teacher, I have a lot of time off during the summer months. And I can remember several years ago, I was able to sit through the public hearing in which Asarco was trying to renew its permit. I sat through about 10 days of lengthy testimony. The city provided compelling evidence against why Asarco should be granted that permit. And as El Pasoans are very well aware, the administrative law judges resoundingly decided that they would not grant Asarco their permit. And define the will of those judges and the will of the people, the will of the city. Nevertheless, the TCEQ granted them that permit. I can remember the kind of bitter taste that left in my mouth. I think it convinced me in my own heart and the hearts of all El Pasoans that that hearing was nothing but a sham, that it was nothing but window dressing to appease El Pasoans into thinking that our concerns were being genuinely listened to. I don't think could be anything further from the truth. I think that convinced all of us that the TCEQ had no credibility anymore with the people of El Paso. And as far as I think I'm concerned, your approval ratings are probably lower than Dick Cheney's.
Okay, this certainly ends the time. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a quick remark.
Yes, you may. Sir, your name?
My name is Juan Garza, and it regards the presentation. You put a couple of cells out on the PowerPoints. I feel that cell number 1 is going to fail because it's right next to the American Canal, and the slope that's adjacent to the canal is aggregate rock. It's not a build-up rock. It's not a retaining rock. It's not a retaining rock wall. There's no cement pilings, nothing to prevent that pond from failing, or that area. Also, when you drive out there, Mr. Rubenstein, I'd like you to look at the pond that's adjacent to the canal. You'll see that the liner's leaking because the strata below that is, you'll see that it's moist. The other thing that I wanted to mention is Category 2 materials were laid all over different spots at the plant that, they contain materials that leach, they contain fire brick that should have been recycled or reused under the Beeville Amendment. But most of all, what I'd like to request from the Department of Justice is that Ms. Terry Sykes' documents be made public related to the enforcement decrees, that Diana Love from the National Environmental Investigation Center also make her documents public so that El Paso has the opportunity to research for itself, to read the documents, the emails that were produced during this consent decrees that affected all of the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think this wraps up our hearing unless anybody else here wishes to speak. Okay, I want to again point up a couple of things of import. First, on the screen is the website the Texas, the address where you can get the documents, both currently you can get current documents from TCEQ, and in the future, when these public hearing records have been submitted and analyzed, the agencies have to respond in writing. And you will have an opportunity to read their responses. Those responses also will be filed with the bankruptcy court. Your comments and the responses. So, yes, ma'am.
Would it be possible for me to say one more thing that I forgot to mention?
Yes, quickly,
My
sure.
name is Deborah Kelly.
Thank you, Deborah Kelly, okay?
I forgot to mention that in remediating the site, I would like to see a grassroots person, somebody representing the people of El Paso also there, not just TCEQ and the DOJ, and hopefully the EPA will definitely be on board, but one of our grassroots people, maybe from the Get the Lead Out Coalition or Acorn or Sierra Club or somebody, so that we know what's going on firsthand. Thank you.
Thank you for the request. Okay, this concludes the meeting. We can turn the public things off, and thank you all. I want to give you all a hand for coming and for your effort and for your attention and for your interest in the site. Thank you very much.